Go. Leave me. I will in Cassio's lodging lose this napkin, and let him find it. Trifles light as air are to the jealous confirmations, strong as proofs of holy writ. This may do something. The more already changes with my poison. Dangerous conceits are in their natures poisons, which at the first are scarce found to distaste, but, with a little act upon the blood, burn like the mines of sulphur. I did say so. Look where he comes. Not Poppy, nor Mandragora, nor all the drowsy syrups of the world shall ever medicine thee to that sweet sleep which thou owedst yesterday.
Ha! Ha! False to me?
What? How now, General? No more of that.
Avaunt! Begone! Thou hast set me on the rack. I swear 'tis better to be much abused than but to note a little.
How now, my lord?
What sense had I in her stolen hours of lust? I saw it not, thought it not, it harmed not me. I slept the next night well, fed well, was free and merry. I found not Cassio's kisses on her lips. He that is robbed, not wanting what is stolen, let him not know it, and he's not robbed at all.
I am sorry to hear this.
I had been happy if the general camp, pioneers and all, had tasted her sweet body, so I had nothing known. Oh, now forever farewell the tranquil mind, farewell content, farewell the plumed troops and the big wars that make ambition virtue. Oh, farewell, farewell the neighing steed and the shrill trump, the spirit-stirring drum, the ear-piercing fife, the royal banner, and all quality, pride, pomp, and circumstance of glorious war. And oh, you mortal engines, whose rude throats the immortal Jove's dead clamors counterfeit, farewell! Othello's occupation's gone.
Is it possible, my lord?
Villain, be sure thou prove my love a whore, be sure of it. Give me the ocular proof, or by the worth of mine eternal soul, thou hadst been better have been born a dog than answer my waked wrath.
Is it come to this?
Apparently it is come to this.
Okay. Has it come to this? Oh, oh, oh. Original pirate material. You're listening to The Streets. Hello, all you textual deviants, and welcome to another edition, final edition of Season 2, Texting Episode 40, Othello Edition. I'm Tomek in St. Petersburg.
And I'm Mark Will in Taipei in the role of Othello. Without blackface.
Thankfully.
I will note. Yeah, so we end as we began, right? The last episode of Season 2 is by the same author as the first episode of Season 1. Isn't that interesting? Remember our inaugural episode on this podcast, Texting Season 1, Episode 1, was a sonnet by William Shakespeare. And here we are, Season 2, Episode 20, the 40th episode in total, motherfuckers. And it is Shakespeare's play, Othello.
Chosen by me, as it's currently part of the IGCSE syllabus, the Cambridge curriculum that I'm teaching.
Thanks for explaining what that is, because I had no idea.
Yeah, they have GCSEs in the UK, and then they have A-levels. Have you heard of either of those?
Yes, I've heard of A-levels and O-levels. And
yeah, A-levels are the ones that universities tend to look at, and you need they'll give you marks plus how many you decided to pass. Something like AP, I guess. But anyway.
I'm O positive.
Good. So
I think that's something else, but anyway.
Yeah, so I've enjoyed kind of reading my way through this play.
First time?
Hard to say. I I've seen it performed, I believe, and
Where?
I don't know. I'm blanking suddenly,
Hmm.
so I'm not
Well,
sure if I've seen it performed actually.
let's talk adaptations and performances. That's maybe not the order that we had intended, but
Okay.
that's that's an important thing to consider, right? Like, what is the actual play? Is it the words on the page, or does it only come to life when it is performed on the stage or for the screen, or as we just did, as a reading performance? um
I think it definitely stands on its own as far as the text. I just want to say because coming fresh off of finishing it today and being moved to the same degree that I would be reading a great piece of literature,
oh, well, no
especially
question,
because
no question.
and you can go slower. I can like constantly be looking up stuff, whereas the language can be overwhelming if you haven't had some time with it when you're seeing it on stage. So in that sense, it's a deeper and richer experience for me reading it.
Sure. Yeah, although, well, I don't know if I would you know make a value judgment. I like to experience a text as many different ways as possible. But
Of
reading
course.
reading the text, of course, is essential. But you know, every time I see a performance or an adaptation, there's some new aspect of the text that I'm introduced to. So some of the famous performances, of course, Olivier's blackface performance, and I will just say now at the outset, I didn't reread the entire play. I looked closely at Act 3, Scene 3, which you told me you wanted to focus on, and I watched a few other clips, but I didn't reread the entire play or watch the entire movie version or anything like that. So there, I may, it's been a while since I've engaged deeply with this text, but I have a lot of personal connections that I'm happy to share. But anyway, there's the Olivier performance, and I looked at some clips online, and have you seen those? It's pretty outrageous. Like his blackface is so cartoonish. And
What
I
about the performance?
Well, it's pretty over the top. What are you
Because I
gonna
don't,
say? It's
I don't
Olivier.
know
You
that
can't.
much about Olivier. Like I know he's a big name, but do you want to tell me more about your experience with him or how I should view him?
I mean, I can't tell you how you should view
No, but
him,
you know what
but
I mean. Like, how is he viewed? Like, what? He's just a big Shakespeare
yeah,
guru,
I
right?
mean, he's one of the great British actors of his generation, along with John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson,
I thought you were gonna say John
and
Cleese.
yeah, he's a little bit later.
Okay.
But he did Olivier, that is, did a good Hamlet. He's like a blonde Hamlet, which I saw that black and white film long ago. Not recently, but I
Yeah, I
remember
know I've seen
enjoying
like a
it
decent amount of that.
and thinking it was a good performance. But this, what I saw of this seemed cartoonish and bombastic.
Even
But
beyond the blackface.
yeah, like the I say bombastic. My dramatic reading that was just heard earlier could probably be considered bombastic too. So who am I to talk? But that was my impression. Again, I didn't watch the whole thing, but just look at a clip of him in blackface. It's
I've
pretty
seen, yeah,
astonishing.
definitely seen
Yeah,
the
it's pretty
visual. It's
astonishing.
it's
But
awkward. I mean, it's enough to put me off of watching
yeah,
it.
it's off-putting. But more recently there was the great Lawrence Fishburne performance, and then Iago is Kenneth Branagh. Uh, I don't know if you've seen that. That's from
I've seen that one. That's
1995.
like the only adaptation I think I've seen start to finish.
Yeah. So that's if you want like a movie version, that's probably the one I would recommend. That's truest, that's like straight Shakespeare. But then of course, as I
Although
mentioned
it's
in the
heavily abridged.
is it?
Yeah,
Okay, what part is cut?
just throughout. It's just significantly shorter.
I don't remember that, but
Yeah.
maybe yeah, I know that they were making use of the camera. I saw like a Brenna soliloquy, um, a clip of that, and there was like some camera trickery that wouldn't have been possible on the stage, for example.
I've seen
And
critics be kind of dismissive of the performances of both Fishburne and the Desdemona actress.
okay,
They
well,
take her to. They claim that because she's not like an English speaker, I think she's Swedish or something, but they just think she doesn't deliver the lines well, and that he's not trained. I
so
didn't mind. I'm just saying. I'm just giving
yeah,
you
it
like a
doesn't, you can't please everyone.
sure.
But I think it's. I mean, I've used it before when like teaching the text, like
Right.
clips to introduce students to Shakespeare that are basically illiterate, right? Like they don't want to read. They could, but they refuse to read because they think it's not interesting. But when they see the guy from The Matrix playing Othello, they pay attention, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right. Right.
and then, of course, as I mentioned in the previous episode, there's the adaptation O, which is actually pretty interesting. I mean, it's like set in a high school, and O is a basketball star, and uh, Iago is named Hugo, and his father is Duke, someone, the coach of the team. So he's like the Duke in the play, and Iago, or Hugo rather, played by Josh Hartnett. There's a scene where he's like injecting himself with some kind of performance enhancing drug, like right in the groin area. It's pretty graphic and shocking. I remember that. And then there's a disturbing scene in which O basically rapes Desi, his girlfriend, played by, what is her name? Not not Kirsten Dunst, but one of those other it girls from the 90s or early 2000s.
So that's why have they chosen to? So that's not really faithful then to the story if he's like raping her, right?
Uh
I mean, they've given that
right
character
there.
quite
I
a
mean,
different.
yeah, there. I mean, of course, it's set in an American high school, and they're like adolescents, and there's a basketball narrative, but there are a lot of very interesting parallels, and it's. I remember having a student who said, "Well, I don't like Shakespeare," and I'm like, "Okay, no one said you had to." She's like, "I like O though." It's like, you know, she expected me to give her a better grade because she liked something. It's not about liking or not liking. But anyway, that was a way to like try to um, encourage students to engage with Shakespeare, and that they're able to recognize the parallels.
Sure.
But I don't want to make this episode too pedantic or pedagogical.
Right. Well, the rape thing is maybe a way of me segueing into like one of the many visceral reactions you can have to this play, which is like, oh, black main character. Uh, Let me clarify why I'm connecting that to rape actually, because that came off a bit awkward. But I thought about Richard Wright's Native Son as a complimentary text. Have you read that?
No.
Okay, are you aware of it?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, there's this iconic character, Bigger Thomas.
Hmm.
You may know that. And anyway, he's kind of seen as like a victim of society. So he kind of does fulfills a lot of the stereotypes that white America have of him, or that white America has of young black men, right? So like
Hmm.
they fear young black men, and he kind of can't help but follow that narrative because it's like what's expected of him, and he ends up not exactly raping a woman, but he starts like kissing a woman who's drunk. He's kind of caught in the act, and in a desperate move to absolve himself of the situation, he smothers her with a pillow, which is
Mm.
obviously like some kind of head nod to Othello. But
Right.
I think you know the character of Othello in terms of his race and his to what degree he does or doesn't fulfill stereotypes is interesting as a one place for us to start. Just like a character analysis of Othello, maybe talking about his attributes, his fallibilities, and how much we should read into that as like a treatment on race. I
Well,
mean, it's obviously like a big topic, right?
I'm thinking of another textual connection. There's the black character in To Kill a Mockingbird who is falsely accused of rape by a white woman.
Is
So
that Boo
that's
Radley?
no, Boo Radley is like one of the
He's the
white
bad guy.
characters.
Okay.
No, it turns out he's not, but
He's the like mentally handicapped guy.
yeah,
Bro,
it's
it's been a
like
while.
yeah, but okay, but the trial in To Kill a Mockingbird is about a black man who's falsely accused by a white woman of rape.
Okay.
So I mean that that's a different version of the story, but maybe on the same theme, like the black other in white society. And I was thinking of, I mean, there are other examples too. I think you may have mentioned Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, right?
I did, but then I don't know. I looked through a synopsis today and like I couldn't see as immediate parallels as like clear as it was with Native Son. Um, but
Well,
I don't know. Well, let's talk about Othello.
the idea, the idea there is that the black man in white society cannot be seen. No one can see him as he is. He's invisible because, everyone's perception of him is wrong.
Mm.
So is that true? Is Othello an invisible man of, Venetian society or Elizabethan society? I wonder if there were any Moors in Shakespeare's England.
From my reading, one possible inspiration is some Moroccan prince or something that was hanging out in London and Shakespeare was, I think, friendly with. So there's the whole discussion of whether the Moor is meant to be North African or what do they call it, Sub-Saharan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know how interesting that particular discussion is. I mean, it could be interesting, but um, I'm more interested, I guess, like on the main thing for me is like, is Othello? Does Shakespeare portray Othello in an impressive way? I know, and we're gonna say both and. I'm like preempting your response.
I'm not
But
saying
if we,
anything. Finish
all
your
right,
question first.
all right. Well, like obviously he has impressive qualities, and then he has qualities that are almost like ridiculous, and you could say, I don't know. I don't want to use the word racist necessarily, but are make him seem like a bit of a simpleton,
Hmm.
right?
Well,
And so
I mean, I think Othello is similar in some ways to the Merchant of Venice. You know, you've got another outsider. In the case of the Merchant of Venice, it is a Jew, right? Um, Shylock. So it's interesting how Shakespeare depicts these outsiders, these others. You know, I had a friend who hated Shakespeare simply for the depiction of Shylock. Like, and she wasn't Jewish; she was like actually Chinese. But she said, "I know he's supposed to be a great writer, but this is the most racist piece of trash that I've ever read." You know, so
I know that. First of all, Greg mentioned that as well. Actually, friend of the show, Greg, who will feature after the show. But he made the comparisons to Merchant of Venice. I've seen Merchant of Venice performed, but it's also vague in my memory. So the only thing I could like contribute to that is that I know that views on Shylock have changed as well, so that he's actually seen kind of positively by many critics, right?
well, yeah. I mean,
Like impressive
that's why they're
or victim.
that's an indication that this is an important text worth exploring. Well, that the Merchant of Venice is, but
Right. But
I
like
would
coming
argue
back to Othello, like
Othello is as well. I mean, it's the same thing. Like to simplify it and say, okay, it's this and not that. End of story. Game over. You know,
and I
that's
don't want to
absurd.
simplify it, but I want to explore it, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, do you think he is kind of playing into some stereotypes perhaps by making Othello so rash, so not so what, gullible,
Very possibly.
credulous?
Very possibly.
Okay.
But you know, another text that comes to mind is Huckleberry Finn. You know, and Jim, and we mentioned Ralph Ellison. He said, you know, I read Huck Finn, but I never wanted to be Jim. I identified with Huck. You know, like Jim. There is
I'm going to take off my sweatshirt for the ladies.
okay.
But keep going. I want to make this as
Well,
seamless as possible.
Jim is a complicated character, but he does seem to or let's say Twain does seem to buy into some of the stereotypes
You
of the
keep jumping
time.
from text to text, which is cool and interesting, but
That's the point of texting, baby.
no, that's the point of intertextuality. It's not necessarily the point of texting. Hold on one sec. All right, down to second sweatshirt. But I still want you to like deal with Othello
I'm dealing.
first. I mean, yeah, but deal with
Let's
him
deal.
without a comparison.
How can I do that? I'm not allowed to compare him to others. What do you want?
Of
How do
course,
you
it's
want me to
interesting,
deal with
but
him?
like, let's stick to Othello. Like,
Okay, Othello. What
I don't know
about him?
if you were like, is Shakespeare's portrayal of Othello? Do you think it's more progressive or regressive? If the goal was to kind of push a vision of a black man for Elizabethan England as someone that they should respect,
Well, I
right?
doubt. I mean, maybe that wasn't the intention. I can't say for sure, but my suspicion is that wasn't part of it. It was just like, oh, here's an interesting story that I can dramatize for the stage.
I don't know because I think, for example, if we may switch over to women pretty soon, and I think you could see that discussion between Desdemona and Amelia that I'm sure we'll talk about as Shakespeare giving a voice to, and I'm not trying to to frame this in like woke language, but giving a voice to the voiceless. And so I think as someone who's smart and probably incredibly capable of empathy and his ability to create different characters, this may have been a motivation for Shakespeare. Like, I'm gonna portray a black man and kind of make my audiences think about what it's like to be a black man in our society, for example. Even if there weren't many black people, but he's just trying to like show the story of an outsider.
Well, you say
Right?
there's
a noble outsider.
You say that
Sorry.
supposedly Will Shakespeare, the actor, knew a Moroccan prince. You said you
Yeah, I think there was some guy that I've read some stuff about.
Yeah, well, we've already talked about how Will Shakespeare may not have even been the actual author of the plays. So maybe not. Whoever wrote the plays, though, has like a universal sympathy with all of humanity. So maybe one motivation could have been to highlight the condition of the outsider and the other, and explore the ways that this causes problems in society. And maybe one purpose was to display some of the hypocrisies and injustices of such a society that has that others people.
Cool. Yeah. And here's where I'm going to go next then. So Greg gave a pretty interesting talk to my class, kind of about how a lot of challenges or a lot of tragedy came from breaking up of the typical social norms, the things that were stable in the society at the time, right? So you have your hierarchy, and the ideal was to be consistent with that, with the way, with society, and kind of just keeping everything stable, right? And this relationship between Othello and Desdemona, because it's transgressive, like that's where the tragedy comes from. So in that sense, is Shakespeare, another question I would have is like, is Shakespeare warning against breaking the norm, or is he kind of saying it's fucked up that we live in a society where breaking the norm results in tragedy? Or
you mean
both,
like, would
again.
he be a supporter of anti-miscegenation laws preventing the intermarriage of white and black folk, as was the case in the American South?
I don't see him as like someone who's going to be out there with picket signs. But I'm sure some people take the play as like a warning, right, against
jungle fever.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
To, allude to the title of a Spike Lee film.
Yeah.
I know we're not supposed to go on these intertextual.
No, by all means.
Tangents.
But also let's talk about Othello. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the answer for you. Like, I don't think it's so simplistic as, see, if you let people from different cultures and or races and or ethnicities intermarry, it's going to end in tragedy. So don't do that. That's not the message of the play, in my opinion.
I guess I'm wondering, sorry to interrupt you, like I'm wondering how the audiences would have reacted, like what their, and this is stuff we can obviously research, and I think people have researched it, and there's a bunch of debates on whether Othello is a racist play, like put on by the Royal Shakespeare Company. Like they have pretty interesting debates with different black actors who the most compelling argument I heard was that because the notion of race was so different and limited at that time, it's like kind of even silly for us to be framing a discussion of racism in a way that we think about race. right? That you can't transplant it onto that time. But my point, I guess, is with the audiences, how much sympathy do you think audiences would have felt for Othello? Presumably, they would have felt a lot,
Well,
right?
I'm thinking of that line, like what's the most potentially racist passage in the play when Iago and is it Rodrigo are shouting outside the uh the house.
Brabantio's house, yeah,
Yeah, and even now, very now, an old black ram is tupping your white ewe. And then, of course,
right.
there's the reference to the beast with two backs, using this very bestial, vulgar language, but it is racially coded, right? Black ram and white ewe. But are we meant to sympathize with him? Like we see later what a piece of shit
Exactly, of
Iago
course.
is. So it's not. It's like the person who holds these views or tries to manipulate people with racial tropes is a demi devil. Is like the villain, the worst kind of villain.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even like ties into last week's episode, right? I mean, we how my dad addressed the Spanish waiter thing. Like John Cleese is such a buffoon himself that we wouldn't necessarily like sympathize with him when he's hitting Manuel. Like I like the John Cleese character, by the way, so that's not really fair. I'm not saying he's a buffoon, but you get my
He
point. We're
is a
not like
buffoon, but
well, but he's likable too
but
in
he's
some way,
not
or
a he's
we
not
sympathize with him.
he's not diabolical like Iago.
Yeah, so but I think I've learned something from my just like voicing my questions, which is that there's no doubt that Othello is a massively like is the tragic figure here. Even though some people would say like it's Desdemona, but I think it's Othello. And if that's the case, there's no doubt the audiences would have been moved. And the fact that audiences will be moved to sympathy with his story, that's progressive. If if the concern at the time is like, oh, we need to make attitudes more progressive towards black people. And all
Well,
that is a
but
very
it,
like modern way of looking at it,
but
which is
that's
kind of
also a universal emotion, jealousy. So everyone can relate to that regardless of race. And maybe that's gendered too. Like maybe it's depicting a certain male type of jealousy. Maybe it's patriarchal jealousy. So there are a
I
lot
guess
of
I'm saying
different
but
ways you can
we
look at it. I mean, I'm thinking of I mentioned that my first exposure to Othello was actually uh, a scene from an episode of the American sitcom Cheers. There is
I
a
watched that by the way like 10 minutes before we started.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. And Othello is played by a white actor who is doing the uh, you know, smothering scene
The
with
smothering,
with
right?
Shelley Long, Diane Chambers in the role of Desdemona, right? So that race is like completely irrelevant. Before I even knew what Othello was, that was my first, like before I had even read a Shakespearean text as a teenager, that was my first exposure to
Mm.
Othello, and it was a white
I
actor
think
playing
that's rare
Othello.
though. It's
What's
quite
that?
rare. I think that's quite rare. I mean, the
Okay,
thing
but
that
that's my experience. That's my
sure, sure.
that's my that's my lived experience. Who are you to deny it?
I'm not invalidating it. I'm just saying like for most people I think Othello is like, oh, that's the one with the black guy at the
I
center,
know,
right?
I know, but what I'm saying is jealousy is a universal
Sure.
emotion, feeling, motivator, and it could also be like analyzed or seen through the lens of male jealousy, patriarchal jealousy.
Sure.
What one would this even be an issue in a polyamorous society? Like, why can't Othello, Iago, Desdemona, Cassio, Amelia, and Bianca all live together as a polyamorous family?
Yeah, yeah.
and they can all bang each other. Why not? It's only like a certain setup, a certain patriarchal setup, which leads to these issues. You know, there's a I had forgotten about this, but I read this, I think, in a synopsis that I was looking at, you know, while preparing for the show. There's some hint that Othello may have had some kind of relationship with Emilia, and Iago
Bro,
is
that's a huge part of it.
and
Yeah,
Iago is
I know
jealous
you're not
about
as
that.
fresh to the text, but yeah, that's like the two primary motivations for Iago's
I
hate are the
know, but he
promotion and
but
the
he
Amelia
said
paranoia.
but he also says like I'm not sure this is true, but I'm going to assume
Right,
it's true and make something out of it. It's not
right.
yeah, but the evidence for that is pretty weak,
No, the
you
evidence
know.
is flimsy, sure, but the knowledge that it's like one of the possible motives for Iago's
So
frustration, that's pretty.
yeah, but same thing. Like that's in a less patriarchal society that wouldn't be an issue, you know. It's like when we were hunter gatherers and lived in groups that practiced group marriage or polyamory or whatever it may have been, that wasn't such an issue.
Absolutely. So at least we're gonna wrap up my little first discussion and just say we're gonna assume that the Othello character moved people, and in that sense, I give props to Shakespeare for making that character a black character in that time. Okay, I think that's so. And now coming on to what you're saying, I think beyond it just being misogynistic, I would say like it's it's taking elements of what we see in the most backwards quote unquote Islamic countries, like in terms of like honor killings, right? Like even if we're gonna accept, okay, we are gonna be monogamous, like there's some part of us that are just more comfortable with single partners and not having the polyamorous approach, but regardless we don't consider it civilized to murder someone, right? So but the fact that Othello sees that as the appropriate response, that is very reminiscent of like an honor killing, right?
Mm. And
It's in
so you
today's
think
time.
there's
So
some influence from his Moorish
no,
background?
no, not necessarily, because I think it seems like that's like what's the word, it's like blessed by Iago, that approach. So maybe that's like just the cultural norm of the time, like, but either way my point is just that it's incredibly regressive to see. And you could throw in, and the religious stuff is all there too, right? Like he thinks that he's doing the right thing there, and there's some lines about that he says something like, well, until she starts actively reacting to the knowledge that Cassio's died, which kind of turns his mood. But initially, he's approaching the killing in this very ceremonious way. Like he's seen this like beautiful virgin, and because she's sinned, it's like best to just purify her and keep her away from any further sinning. So it has this like, yeah, this deliverer of justice, holy justice,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's mixed in with some anger. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting, I guess.
Well, I don't know how to react to that. Like
React, damn it.
well, I just see it as a sociopath, Iago, seducing a jealous man to an act of homicide.
Okay, but here's the quote really fast, yeah? So this is so when Desdemona cries out, knowing that Cassio's dead, Othello says to her, "Thou dost stone my heart, and makest me call what I intend to do a murder, which I thought a sacrifice." So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, again, that's kind of interesting. Because initially I think he even says like I'm okay. in the first part of the temptation scene, he seems happy just considering it like just breaking up with her and like ending the love, but that would be it. But then it like
Well, here's another way to look at it that I just thought of. All of these guys are fucking military people, you know? They're all professional killers. So we talked about this when we were discussing Dead Man's Shoes, right? The soldier
yeah.
that returns home and can't reintegrate into civil so-called civilized society, right? Civilian life, let's say. Could that be part of it too? Like the the switch is easy to flip on again, right? To become a murderous homicidal maniac, all you have to do is flip the switch. And as a soldier, Iago knows how to do that, right? Like he knows how to uh flip the switch in a fellow military man. It's like killing is their profession, and he knows how to like push the right buttons to make it happen in inappropriate contexts.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting and valid take. I'm not. I did read Coriolanus. Coriolanus, is that how you pronounce it?
Coriolanus. Yeah.
I read Coriolanus at one point, but I don't remember the plot very well. But I've heard critics say that Coriolanus suffered from similar challenges reintegrating into civil life after like great military successes. So yeah, that Othello just really struggles with kind of this aspect of life rather than when he's not on the battlefield. So yeah.
Well, maybe
do we want to talk about? Go on.
Well, you mentioned like the depiction of women and the suggestion that maybe there is a kind of feminist streak in Shakespeare's depictions of women in this play. Well, okay, so you know, maybe he's critiquing that idea. It's kind of like what's called the Madonna whore complex, right? Either she's the pure, pristine angel, or she's a dirty slut. You know, like there's no that's maybe that idea is being critiqued too. And this is why I always liked the character of Emilia, as I told you in text earlier this week. After reading this play as an undergraduate, my roommate and I got a couple of female cats. I can't remember where we got them, but mine I named Amelia after Amelia from this play. I just liked her saucy attitude, you know, sassy, and she talked directly. You know, she says when men are done with us, they belch us. You know, I like that kind of almost.
Dude, I've got an incoming message. Incoming message. It's time to play Fuck, Marry, Kill. And welcome. Mark, today we're going to be playing Fuck, Marry, Kill with the three primary characters from Othello. Will it be Desdemona, the innocent and attractive Venetian sexy, I shouldn't say sassy, but she is pretty sexy, I think. Will it be Emilia, Iago's wife, and as you described her, inspiration for your cat's name? Or will it be Bianca, the strumpets, but the woman who also feels like many good qualities about her? I can't really riff too well. So
that was an interesting segue. Well, the answer is.
Do you need to think about it?
Not at all. I have an answer ready to hand.
Okay. Let me think of mine really fast before you. Sorry, just so I don't want yours to cloud mine. Okay, so give me like at least 6 seconds, because I thought I decided, but I wanted to just make sure.
Tick tock, tick tock.
Okay, I guess I'm
Can I answer now?
But yeah, go for it.
Okay, I ain't killing anybody.
You have to.
I ain't marrying anybody, and I'm gonna fuck all three of them. So there you go.
Okay.
That's my
All right,
answer.
and now that's beautiful, and that's part of your polyamorous ideal, and I respect that. Can you also give an answer according to the confines of the task? Would you be
No,
able
I'm not
to?
killing anyone, man. I'm not
It's
even
not
going to
about killing.
contemplate
Okay,
that.
we can say dismiss. I don't like the killing aspect either. That part always kind of made me shudder a little bit, being the tender rose petal that
Well,
I am.
look, if we're going to quibble about that, then
I'm interested more
I'm
like
gonna
who would you want to marry? Who would you
if
want to
we're gonna
spend life partner?
if we're gonna quibble about that, then I'm gonna say I will make love to all three of them. Okay,
No, the point is who would you like to
and
spend most time with?
it'll be the best experience that any of them
Of
have
course it
ever
will.
had.
Who would you like to be your life partner? Or fine, should I just be the one to answer and you're gonna react to that, or
As a
what?
life partner, like a day-to-day companion, probably Amelia.
Okay, and so for me it'd be Desdemona.
But I want to bang her too.
Yeah, you of course you bang your life partner.
Okay,
You
then
don't get you don't have to not bang her.
what's the distinction of fuck?
The distinction is
There's you admit
that
there's
you
some
only get to fuck
overlap.
the person.
You
You
admit
only get
that
to fuck the person like once,
you
whereas the
admit
life partner you.
that's not what it says. You admit that there's overlap. Maybe you fuck her, then you marry her, and before you yourself die, you end up killing her, maybe accidentally or otherwise. So it
All
could be.
right,
So anyway, I pick Amelia.
all right, and that's the only place where I thought we might find like I kind of predicted that we would differentiate on that because
Okay.
I would pick Desdemona because like I'm fresh off of finishing the book as I said, and I love her, man. She's such a sweetheart, Yeah. So and like I see nothing, and I like Bianca. I like Amelia too. Like I got no beef with Amelia, but you gotta get a woman who is so devoted to you, and like by the way, Russian women. I've heard many accounts that that's like one of their strongest traits is they're super super like loyal and devoted. I can attest to that. And
maybe I should move there.
It's awesome, and I say that with gratitude and with humility. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just saying that. Saying that, maybe we should get into. Can we get into Desdemona a little bit in terms of what? Because I want to praise her and I do praise her and I love her, but that doesn't mean that I think she's faultless. And some people would say that just like we can also link this to a discussion of wait, let me try and say it without your help. Don't help me. I'm gonna fuck it up anyway, but hamartia. Did I hamartia? Okay.
That's the Greek pronunciation.
All right.
Should we explain what that is?
Yes, in a second. But just like I was gonna say, like the hamartia for Desdemona, would be probably naivety as well, in the same way that Othello. I mean, if we're going to include her as kind of like the part of the tragic package of the story. Okay, now go on.
You said package.
Professor.
Well, let's explain what that is. Hamartia is a term from archery. It means missing the mark. Okay, so you take a shot with your bow and arrow, you miss the mark, you don't hit the bullseye. Now, in Greek tragedy, it means tragic flaw, right? But this is also
Achilles' heel.
Okay, but this is
in a more
also
cliche way, right?
This is also the Greek New Testament word for sin. So that's like that's like when you think about that in the context of Christian theology, it's like, well, sin is not this metaphysical, like good and evil, irredeemable flaw,
fire and brimstone, right?
Yeah, it's just like a little fuck up that causes problems, It's like missing the mark.
Right.
Missing the mark.
It's more more humane way of looking at
yeah,
it, more
you're not,
empathetic.
yeah, you're not perfect, you know, no one is. So everyone has their little hamartia from time to time.
Sure. So, do you see Desdemona as? I mean, are you critical of her?
I
Does
mean,
anything that she does?
I don't like this kind of it girl, you know. I like the
What's
I
an it girl, by the way? I don't know.
well,
You said that earlier in the show, but I don't really know what that
she's
means.
the one that everybody wants, you know. She's like the perfect 10. She's like everybody's ideal. She's like the hottest girl at the party. She's like the most popular girl in high school. She's the homecoming queen, the prom queen.
Does
You
the
know,
homecoming queen disobey her father though, and go for the super older person
if
who's
she
from a
has
different culture?
if she has daddy issues, she might. Yeah, I see what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
saying.
I you know, all of that kind of idealization. Maybe she doesn't buy into it herself, so it's not on her, but I just always was more attracted to Amelia.
Fair enough.
Maybe because she was more attainable and more relatable, you know, like Desdemona
Right.
on her pedestal is just like, oh, I'm not even going to bother with that.
And I guess that would be, yeah, that would be the kind of the criticism that I think you could make against Desdemona is that she is just not human enough.
But she may not have put herself there, you know, like it's the you can't blame the hot girls for being hot, you know, it's like other people's
Yeah, it's not
perceptions.
just hotness though.
I know, but I'm just trying to like put it in a more
Yeah.
modern context. But one very beautiful line when Othello is explaining how he wooed Desdemona, not with witchcraft, okay? I didn't use some kind of black magic, you know, pun intended. Uh,
Right.
but he says, she loved me for the dangers I had passed, and I loved her that she did pity them. So it,
Right.
you know, it came about through conversation, you know.
Right.
She he told her all the stories of his exploits and his suffering in war and in battle, and she sighed and said it was wonderful, was piteous, whatever it was she said. And then, you know, he was moved by the fact that she was moved, and so there was a real connection there,
Yeah, and I think that's to
however
Shakespeare's credit
improbable.
too.
Yeah.
If we come back to the whole idea of like how is Othello like a character that's impressive or not, he is juxtaposed against all these flowery, curly-haired Venetians, and it's clear that kind of Shakespeare sees him as superior, I would say, like or more interesting, more layered, right?
Well,
So
you know, I had a professor as an undergrad who said one theory, he didn't necessarily subscribe to this, but he said one theory is that um, Iago was actually attracted to Othello, and he was jealous of Othello's apparent preference for Cassio. So actually, it was like a gay threesome here, and the lovers' triangle was Cassio, Iago, and Othello, and the women were just like,
appendages.
yeah, well, if you insist on using that term.
I'm open to part of that discussion for sure. I mean, I brought up with my students even that there's almost like a wedding scene between Iago and Othello, right? Towards the end of the Temptation, where he says like Othello says, I don't know if I have the line right in front of me, but it's like I am bestowed or betrothed to you forever, and they're both on their knees, and it's like, and they're calling up instead of like God blessing it though, they're kind of like summoning devils because they feel like they have these like murders to carry out now, but all the elements of like of a ceremony are there.
Sounds pretty gay.
And like it really is. I mean, Othello has in theory, like your wife is your best friend, and this has been like this very smooth replacement. It's like now Iago is gonna be the best friend that you trust, and that's like kind of that in a way that's patriarchal because why is he given preference over Desdemona's story? Like why does Othello hold him in such high regard that he would be willing to like let that story trump his own private relationship with his wife? I mean, there's more to it than that, but yeah.
Well, that's an important question. As you're asking it, I'm thinking because after all, he's not that smart, he's just a dumb soldier who follows orders. So maybe he's easily misled. You could look at it that way. But, on this gay theory, the lover's triangle with the three men, isn't there mention someone is like relating a dream? He wakes up kissing someone on the mouth, isn't it? Cassio.
Yeah, I can tell you about that really quick. Though. Here's the lines.
Yeah,
here are the lines at the end of 3:3. It's like the last line from Othello is, "Now art thou my lieutenant," and like Iago says, "I am your own forever."
Yeah,
So it's like really. But I think even I want to talk about what you're talking about, but really quick, even if it's not sexual, it doesn't matter. It's like it's still the primary relationship of your life.
Yes.
Right? That's the point. It's like, and if that's between a man, it could be, so it's still a competition for like attention and for primacy.
Yes.
So, okay, but like as far as the dream sequence you're talking about, yeah, that's like one of the main evidences that Iago uses. He says that he was like lying next to Cassio, and Cassio put his leg over his leg and started like moaning and stuff and calling out. So yeah,
so that I think that's another piece of textual evidence that proponents of this theory have put forward.
So let's just discuss this for the rest of the show then.
What?
And then we can title our video like, homoeroticism in Othello, and that will be like our niche on the market, because like we're gonna be trying to find an in for how to get hits on YouTube. So I think this is gonna be the way.
Well, maybe we could focus on the cuckolding.
It is Pride Month.
Maybe we could focus on the cuckolding. We could like corner the Othello as cuck niche market.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I'm not even saying that facetiously, because this word cuckold, it's like a word that I never really fully understood. So maybe you can explain it a little bit.
Well, I'll
give you my... Yeah, go on.
A cuckold is a man who is being cheated on by his legal wife.
Okay, and what's
a married man whose wife is banging someone else.
What's the etymology?
It's
Do you
related.
know anything about the etymology?
It's related to cuckoo, I think. But the cuckold is often depicted as having horns. Like it says, do you? I don't know. Do I look like I have horns? In other words, do I look like I'm a cuckold? Yeah, I don't see.
That's why I'm trying to understand what the animal is.
I don't know how.
Is this an animal?
I don't know how it relates to cuckoo, but I think that was its origin. Let me look it up. Actually,
I'm looking it up now. The word cuckold derives from the cuckoo bird, alluding to its habit of laying its eggs in other birds' nests.
Okay, there you go.
So, but if you're laying your eggs in other bird's nest, that would suggest that the cuckoo is like the one who's
banging
with
someone else's.
Yeah. So the cuckold is not the one who's being.
But it is the cuckold is the man that's being cheated on. That's for sure.
Well, right, but I'm saying so that's kind of confusing in a way.
I agree. But where are the
Um,
horns? Does that particular bird have horns? We can't just.
okay, here we go. In
Mm-hmm.
Western traditions, cuckolds have sometimes been described as wearing the horns of a cuckold or just wearing the horns.
Mm-hmm.
This is an allusion to the mating habits of stags who forfeit their mates when they are defeated by another male.
Oh, okay.
But then that means we've like abandoned the cuckoo reference, right? Now we've
Right.
just taken on a different animal.
So it's all confused.
Okay. Okay, so that's the cuckold vibe.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, uh, we're already an hour in. I just want to point out that this play has some of the most. I mean, we've alluded to a
I
couple
want
of
to talk about a
passages,
couple
but
of things though. If we're gonna go to quotes, like I still want to talk about. I want to save a little bit more airtime to Iago at least.
so we have to do it in order or what?
No, no. I just if we want to go, I'm just saying. I thought we kind of briefly mentioned maybe doing the quotes last, but we can do it now if that's where you're
Let's just.
what you're feeling.
I'm in that mode, so let's just
All right, let's go
do
for it.
that.
Quotes
So
it is.
in that impromptu dramatic reading I did, there's mention of pride, pomp, and circumstance of glorious war, and of course, this is the origin of pomp and circumstance, the Edward Elgar musical piece that is used. It was a military march before World War One. That was its purpose. It's probably used as war propaganda, but now it's like used at every graduation ceremony in the English speaking world. I think beautiful piece of music actually, but the title "Pomp and Circumstance" is clearly taken from Othello here. Uh, of
By the
course,
way, you always say Othello, but isn't it Othello? Othello?
Othello. That's the Texas pronunciation.
I thought
Biatch.
so. Okay,
All right. That was a gratuitous biatch. I apologize for
that's
that.
fine. No, I've got the progressive reading of bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Like I called Robert bitch last week, and like I don't know, he didn't react like with the joke that it's supposed. That's very affectionate for me. Like you're my friend if I can call you bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm just saying.
And of course, oh, beware, my lord of jealousy. It is the green-eyed monster which doth mock the meat it feeds on. Green-eyed monster. That's, we have the phrase green with envy, right?
Yeah,
Why
yeah, sure.
green? What happens? Does our skin change color? We become how is it green? Is it something to do with the liver? It like discolors us as if we had jaundice or something.
I was explaining. We were discussing this quote in class, and then at my last comment was kind of like towards one girl, and then she's like, "What?" And her eyes are green, so she was just kind of like, "Why are you looking at me?" It was just I don't know, amusing. But there's a song by like Erykah Badu called, which I heard like talking about my eyes are green because I eat a lot of vegetables. It don't have nothing to do with your new friend. Something like that. Anyway, I always that's my main association with green eyes.
Okay, so
So I
it's
had to kind
not
of speed
due
up
to
that.
jealousy. The green eyes.
Well, of course it is. I mean, that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point she's making. Yeah.
If you say so.
Yeah, she says she's like joking about it, right? She says like, "It's my eyes are green because I eat a lot of vegetables. It has nothing to do with your new friend."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I
Right? So
mean,
it's like clever way
she
of.
wasn't born jealous. It's not like she had blue or brown
Ah,
eyes
right,
and then
right,
they
yeah, 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 yeah.
changed to green.
Sure, sure,
But
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, but if that's the origin of the green eye jealousy,
but it
is that where it comes from?
oh green eye. Yeah, it is green eye. I'm just thinking of like green with envy. I mean, but we associate anger with red, right?
Right.
Often, and blue with sadness. So why is green like? Is there any natural reason for jealousy to be associated with that color? I don't know.
Maybe some kind of nausea and like vomit or something.
Could be, could be. We mentioned the
In the
beast.
words of Mark, one never knows. I you just said that like in the last show in response to something I said, and I just found it funny because it was like I felt like it was pretty like dismissive of what my theory. One never knows; it could be. But
Well,
anyway,
that was about
sorry,
that
I'm
was
just
about Cleese and Connie Booth. You know, I
yeah,
was
that's
just
right.
saying
I
like
just like
we hear a lot of different things, but how can we know? It's just like reports in
sure.
the Guardian. How reliable is that?
Please don't bring up that
Exactly,
trash.
exactly. So the beast with two backs, we talked about that. That's just
I
such a
like that one.
that's a beautiful expression. You know, however, of course, it's vulgar at the same time, but nice. You
It's
know,
hot.
yeah, it's amazing. Like that's just brilliant. Heart on my sleeve, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember the exact line, but it's something like I'm not
I've
gonna.
got it right in front of me. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just says. For when my outward action doth demonstrate the native act and figure of my heart in complement extern, 'tis not long after, but I will wear my heart upon my sleeve for
For
daws to
daws
peck
to
at.
peck at.
I am not what I am.
I am not what
That's the
I
kind of
am.
crucial.
Mm,
That's pretty crucial.
yeah. Uh, so again, beautiful language. The poetry is masterful. Very
It's amazing.
a beautiful, beautifully constructed. Um, what else? I
Can
always
we start
like.
jumping into some of these like I am, I'm not, I am, all these things? Because I got a couple that are like linked to that. So first,
Are you
in
going to
Act One,
refer
Scene One, he
to
says,
my epic poem of Letters and a Man, which plays on that?
"I would like to, yeah."
Mm.
So do you need? Are you going to talk about I am not what I am, or
Well, that's
another one?
I appropriate that line at the end.
Okay. Well, okay, then go ahead.
No, I don't have anything more to say
Okay.
about it. It's just that I've thought long and hard about this particular line. I am not what I am, and in conjunction with the big biblical phrase, I am that I am. You know, which is
And in conjunction with the Eminem phrase, "I am whatever you say I am."
no, but now that you mention it, sure, that's a connection as well.
Well, that one's interesting because it's like a third option in a
Mm-hmm.
way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like, uh, so
Well,
what did your
there's
reflections lead you
also
to think about?
well, there's also the Rig Veda. It is and is not, neither is nor is not. So you know, I played on that with I am and am not, neither am nor am not.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So as usual, you allowed yourself the array of
both
possibilities.
and baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, I was let me throw a quote in the links. It says, "Were I the Moor, I would not be Iago." It's like a, kind of a weird line, you know?
mm,
Don't you think? Did you think about that? Have you know? And then, well, the next line is, "In following him, I follow myself." But I just think that's a cool line. I don't know. Were I the Moor, I would not be Iago.
like his
I don't know.
uniqueness as a sociopath.
Yeah, or in terms of just like he doesn't care about the Moor in that sense, or he doesn't care about. I don't exactly understand the line. Is I guess my point,
What
but I
is it
like the way it
again?
sounds. Were I the Moor, I would not be Iago.
Oh, Moore,
In
M
following,
O O R, not More.
yes, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Uh, yeah. What do you think he means by that?
That's what I'm saying. I don't exactly understand, except
If I, maybe that's like one of the racist lines. If I were black, I would not be who I am. White
I don't
identity.
think so. I think it's more just some kind of like coming back to all this. I'm not what I am, and I don't know. I think all these plays with,
Identity.
and then in 3 3 he says, "Men should be what they seem, or those that be not, would they might seem none." But
But
even
that's,
just
he's not sincere there. He's
right, he's not
obviously, you're
sincere, but
right.
it's still interesting that this theme is like finding ways to jump into different places. You know?
Well, I mean, we have to point out that Iago is a classic Machiavel. He's like Edmund in King Lear, like the Machiavel being like the embodiment of what Elizabethans perceive to be the characteristics of the Machiavellian prince, like the qualities of the ruthless leader uh, described in Machiavelli's Prince. I mean, it's
Right.
it's not. It's a sort of misunderstanding of that text, but the idea is that it's better to be feared than loved, and any expediency is validated in the pursuit of power, right? Like it's the ultimate
Right,
villain,
right,
the
right.
ultimate
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ultimate anti-hero that we talked about uh, again when we were discussing Dead Man's Shoes. That's episode 18 of season 2 if you would like to go back and listen, people. But you know, he's also associated with the devil. There's the line Othello says, um he looks at his foot and he says, like, that's a fable. In other words, he's expecting Othello to have like a cloven hoof, like a real devil
I
would.
thought it was the other way around, where Othello sees a hoof on Iago at
Yes,
the end.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
says,
yeah.
but
Okay.
he says something like, "But that's a fable." In other words, he
Right, right.
should he should have a cloven hoof, but that's a fable.
So, can I
Doesn't he
share
say something?
some?
What's the exact line? Demand this demi devil something something. He wants to know why he did it, right? But then Iago, I think this is a great line too. Demand me nothing. What you know, you know. From this time
Oh
forth,
yeah,
I never will speak word. It's like,
yeah.
wow, the mystery of the sociopath. It's like you will never understand what motivates a sick fuck like me.
Right. Here's the line that you're talking about. I look down towards his feet, but that's a fable.
Exactly.
If that thou beest the devil, I cannot kill thee.
Mm-hmm. But
And then he wounds him.
earlier, doesn't he say something like, demand this demi devil explain himself, something, something? We should be more prepared with these quotes, but we're not. It's
Because we're
impromptu.
just
We're
texting.
texting. Don't be
Uh,
don't be so, academic about it, people. Uh well,
can I throw some critical views on Iago for you to react to?
I want to point out before you do that, if I may, I want to point out
Sure.
that my feeling about him has changed. I shared with you earlier this week a little kind of ode to Iago that I wrote after first reading this. As a angry young man, I was like attracted to these villainous anti-heroes more than,
You incel.
yeah, kind of like that, there's some aspect of that, like, uh it's something I'm not proud of, but I had read Dostoevsky, and when I first
And
read
Jordan Peterson. Sorry, I'll stop.
no, when I first read Brothers Karamazov, I my favorite character was Ivan, but I also had a sympathy towards Smerdyakov. It's like, because he was such a piece of shit, and maybe I felt like that myself. I identified with these outcast characters, over identified with them. But as when I reread Brothers Karamazov later, I was like disgusted by Smerdyakov, because I learned that he was torturing cats and dogs. It's like, oh, fuck this. It's kind of like the fascination people have with characters like Charles Manson, like, oh, or serial killers. There there's like a romanticization of the transgressive character. So anyway, just for what it's worth, I wrote these lines as an undergrad. Iago, brave conniver, pious fraud, thy treachery I do intend to extol. Envious of thine evil, I shall laud the low and bitter cruelty of thy soul. I'm not proud of it, but you know,
It's well written.
yeah, there was a
It
time
captures a certain
when
moment.
of course I don't think I ever fully endorsed, him as a person or his values, but there was something about his nihilism that I was attracted to as an angry young man. At the same time, however, as I say, and it was at this same time, I very much liked his wife and sympathized with her. I loved Amelia. I named a cat after her. So,
Right.
don't despise me too much, people.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of things I want to say, but I want to share a couple interpretations of Iago.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I think I already said this to you, but Iago himself has more lines than any other Shakespearean character.
I saw that.
1,097 lines.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's just for your next pub quiz. But so we've got the interpretation, which I think is pretty easy to get behind, and which we've already kind of alluded to, which is like that Iago's a portrait of a psychopath. And this critic, Fred West, believes that Shakespeare had observed that there exist perfectly sane people in whom fellow feeling of any kind is extremely weak, while egoism is virtually absolute, and thus he made Iago.
Well,
So I think that's like,
this is the Machiavelli.
Yeah.
He'll do anything
yeah,
to obtain his own ends, right? The ends always justify the means, no matter how horrific.
yeah, but even the Machiavelli, I feel like, in a way, is more redeeming because it's
got
I think Iago's,
it's got like more
yeah,
practical,
it's more goal oriented.
Goal
Yeah,
oriented.
I feel like,
and Iago is just like a total nihilist. I mean, he's just
doing it for sport, essentially.
Yeah.
Right? But contrary to this position is another position which I don't necessarily agree with, but I just found stimulating. I tried to find the whole article, which was written in the 1930s,
Mm-hmm.
but believe it or not, it's still like all behind academic paywalls, which is just crazy to me. Like, I mean, it's just interesting that we can access any movie or song, but I can't access an academic's article. I'm saying I feel bad for the academic in a way.
1930s.
Yeah, it's just weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but the little clips that you get on Wikipedia are interesting. So John Draper, on the other hand, postulates that Iago is simply an opportunist who cleverly grasps occasion, spurred on by the keenest of professional and personal motives. Draper argues that Iago seized occasions rather than made them. According to his theory, Iago is the first cause, but events, once underway, pass out of his control. Last sentence here. Following this logic, Draper concludes that Iago is neither as clever nor as wicked as some would think, and the problem of his character largely resolves itself into the question, was he justified in embarking upon the initial stages of his revenge?
Was he justified?
I don't know if I like the way that ended, but I still think it's just to say that he's just an opportunist who cleverly grasps occasion. I think that's a very generous reading, like overly so. But it's funny to hear that someone in academia is still trying to is making that argument, which is kind of cool in some way, right? I mean, it's quite a provocative position.
Again, I go back to that last line. We will never know what motivates him because he refuses to talk, Right. It's like, I remember seeing a movie with, what is that guy's name? He played Jackson Pollock, Ed Harris. He plays some psychopath, and he's like, you will never be able to explain why I am what I am. You think you can explain it with your psychological theories, like someone sexually molested me as a child and that's why I do all this. He's like, no, there's no answer. You will never understand this kind of evil. And I have had experience with people like this. You won't understand. You can't understand. They don't understand themselves, and you can't understand. The best thing to do is just get the fuck away from them.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if we want to go into the metaphysical right now or like the spiritual zone, but I think I live under this kind of working theory that you can't really be happy without like love and kindness, those kind of general life directions. But I wonder if, the types of positions that you're referring to, like if they would challenge that kind of universal principle, because they would say like, don't apply that to me, like I just function differently. Like, is
Well,
it possible to get a same kind of like happiness, right,
well,
from this kind of
you
lifestyle?
know, Camus points out that all of the heroes of Sade's works, right, the Marquis de Sade, they're all motivated by hatred, and that they find their
And they
satisfaction.
thrive or what?
Well, in his works, they're the successful ones, the people that are the most Iago like, the most ruthless, you know,
Or
amoral,
they enjoy? Are they
immoral.
happy?
Well, he would argue no, like ultimately he rejects the Sadian hero, uh, because I don't know if it's as simple as this, but one reason is that they never do experience love. And, same thing in Dostoevsky, who also explored the dark depths of the human heart, right? Ultimately, he concluded, I think we can say that there was redemption in forgiveness and mercy and love and all of these things, not hatred.
Those are some nice words that Greg will get into in the post show as well. Um, I mean, if I wanted to be like really materialistic, not in terms of the money way, but like everything is. If I do this, I feel like I'm what's his name, Slavi. What's that guy's name?
Zizek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but I mean, I'm kind of part of me is inclined to think that just life is just all about stimulation anyway, like different types of like stimuli. Like one part of my stimuli is like activated by talking to you, and then like another is like activated by cuddling with my wife. And it's not like, so if that's what I reduce it to, then I don't know, this idea of like redemption and love starts to get a bit like de-emphasized. It's like not as critical because it's really just about like how am I feeling good enough in the moment to be enjoying myself, and I can do that in a variety of ways.
Well,
But
the
anyway, maybe
brain
that's a
the
bit off
brain is
topic.
just a chemical reaction, or like all the experiences we have are chemical reactions of one sort or another.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, really quickly, I think we should at least deal with the predominant criticism of Iago, which is, as put in Coleridge's words, motiveless malignancy
Oh,
to
that's
the
what Coleridge
detriment.
says. That's a
Yeah,
good description.
but to the play's detriment for some people, like something that maybe would not rank Othello as maybe the top tier of
Oh
Shakespeare
yeah, well, it's
plays.
not my favorite. I mean, I certainly don't.
But is that one of the reasons why
Well,
that is not your favorite?
I hadn't thought about it, but I don't put it in the same category as Lear and Hamlet. Maybe that's just me, the way they affect me. I think it's a lesser
But
play
maybe
than
because
those.
Hamlet's very relatable, right? Like Hamlet is someone I've definitely connected to Hamlet and been like, yes, that is like these are my problems.
Mm-hmm.
But when we have someone like kind of arguably two dimensional like Iago is, and he's the dominant figure, then maybe that weakens the play to some extent.
Mm.
I don't know.
That's like personal preference, I guess you could say. Like you could make an argument why one is superior to the other, and there's a hierarchy of Shakespearean plays, but I'm not I'm not going to defend such a position to the death. I'm just going to say that for me personally, Hamlet and Lear are more important than Othello. But like I said, Othello has some of the most beautiful poetry in all of Shakespeare, in all of the English language, in all of world literature, we could say. And we've already discussed some of those lines, right? So
Yeah.
take what you
Good.
will from it.
Is there anything that we didn't touch on which you want to get in? I'm okay with where we are. I don't have the timer out right now, by the way. I
Well,
can't even see the time, unfortunately. I don't know
it's almost an hour and a half, so we need to wrap it up, I think. But yeah, I think
Okay.
we discussed everything on our respective lists. Of course, there's more we could talk about. Our purpose was not to give a summary, but just to explore different aspects of the text, which maybe we or you, dear listeners, had not considered before. And we want to remind you that this is the last episode of season 2. So please follow us on Substack. I'm at markwillwright.substack.com. And you are at
tomekb.substack.com.
Yeah, so check us out there for updates. And
check Mark's YouTube channel.
Yes, we'll be
To see
uploading
us
more videos. I've got a backlog of previous episodes. I'll put this one up probably next week, and then we'll have some other episodes from earlier in season 2 that I never did put up. I'll edit those and put them up, maybe with some clips, and we'll regroup, and we'll see you again for season 3. And if you have any texts that you would like us to consider, please let us know, because we're happy to take requests. That's part of the fun. And if you'd like to contribute with reactions of your own, we're always open to those. The more, the merrier.
Yeah, and making texting is a very collaborative journey, as Mark just alluded to. So I just wanted to add that I'm considering making a new jingle, which would include many of you. I'd like people to just kind of record themselves reading the topic of one of our previous pods, and then I want to make an audio mix from that. So that's one thing. And also, friend of the show, Rich, is doing the promo poster for this week's show. And if you're interested in working on our show through graphics, maybe doing some editing, potentially we may be including some guests in the next season. So this is definitely something that we want to be building community, and to be something that feels like you're a part of it. It's not just something where you're listening to some abstract show which you are not as connected to. This is a chance for you to be part of something that is really living and fluid, and you can be a creator. You can be part of as well.
Yeah, but let us know what you're thinking, don't feel limited.
You're talking to me now or the audience?
No, I'm talking, well, I know you're going to let me know what you're thinking, but I'm talking to the other textual deviants out there. Don't feel limited by what we've mentioned here. There are all kinds of possibilities. There are many ways to engage in texting.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll see you in season 3. Until then.